New York City's rent stabilization law is leading to a wave of bankruptcies among landlords. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting topic for you today, and it has to do with the wave of bankruptcies that are hitting New York landlords. And you know what? It's not unexpected. Obviously, the rent stabilization law does not allow landlords to be able to increase their rents enough to actually cover their expenses. And that's the real reason that you've seen so many bankruptcies. And you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot more as we go forward. So, I always talk about rent control, how rent control will lead to basically the financial collapse of all these landlords. It will lead to properties becoming dilapidated and fall into disrepair. The tenants, they don't benefit. The landlords don't benefit. Now, the city, they don't benefit either, and meanwhile, while they say the landlords can't increase their rents, they're keeping property taxes high. They keep their property tax increases super high. Don't you think that's funny how that works? I do. Okay, I think that's absolutely ridiculous. If you tell a landlord they can't raise the rent, then you shouldn't be able to raise the property taxes, or you should be limited to the exact same amount of increase as the rent increase. But anyway, there's a nice article here, and it's talking about how all these bankruptcies are being driven by the 2019 rent stabilization law. And I've covered this law many times. It is a prime example of what not to do. What not to do if you want your city to thrive and you want there to continue to be development within your city, okay? And, prime example right here. And I got to go over this article because it is quite interesting. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. So, first of all, are you surprised that there's a lot of landlords who are declaring bankruptcy due to these rent controls? Okay, because I don't like to call it rent stabilization. That sounds so proper. That sounds so like, I'm trying to mislead you. It's rent control, okay? People hate rent control and they're like, we can't call it that. We're gonna call it the rent stabilization law. It's the same thing. It is rent control. It is rent control. Everyone pay attention. It is rent control, okay? So, are you surprised that there's landlords who are falling into bankruptcy, that there are properties that are dilapidated, there's people keeping units empty, all due to this law? There's a housing shortage, probably also due to this law. So, are you surprised any of this stuff is happening? This is like the playbook of rent control right here. This is exactly what happens to everywhere that they have these laws implemented. Yet, they are surprised that this is happening. But anyway, let me get into the article. This article is coming from BloombergLaw.com, and it says, New York City outer borough landlords flood Brooklyn's bankruptcy court. Brooklyn, Queens real estate bankruptcies are the most common in the U.S. Rent stabilization stalled development, driving a surge of cases. Yep, stalled development and drives a surge of bankruptcies. What a surprise. Anyway, let's get into it. A wave of distressed real estate properties in New York City's outer boroughs of Brooklyn and Queens are dominating business bankruptcy filings at the federal courthouse in downtown Brooklyn and contributing to the district's outsized share of cases nationwide. The U.S. Bankruptcy Court for the Eastern District of New York, often overshadowed by its sister court in Manhattan as a hub for corporate restructuring, has edged out all 93 other U.S. federal districts when it comes to real estate-related bankruptcy filings over the last several years. Comprising the city's two most populous boroughs, in addition to Staten Island and Long Island, the district abounds with largely residential properties saddled with unmanageable debts. Yeah, of course, we're talking about a very, very highly populated area with tens of thousands of buildings in it. So yeah, you're going to see a lot of real estate related debt coming out of there. Okay, so I would say that the population wise, it's more populated than many states. Definitely the state I live in. I live in Nebraska. We don't even have a population of 2 million people in my state. They probably have more people than that living in Queens alone. Okay, so not surprising that they have so many of these bankruptcies there, but even then, the real estate prices and the real estate market in New York also are leading to a lot of these bankruptcies, especially because of this rent stabilization law. if you aren't making enough money in Nebraska and you go bankrupt, at least you have the option of being able to increase the rents. Now, that doesn't mean the tenants are going to pay that amount of rent, but you at least have that option available. So in New York, though, yeah, you're stuck under rent control. You're stuck under rent control. You can't get out. You can only increase whatever their rent guidelines board decided is a fair amount for you to be able to raise rents, and that's usually not enough to even cover basic maintenance and repairs. So we'll see more cases of bankruptcies. We'll see, financial problems, and look in the newspapers, look in the news headlines for stories about properties falling apart and run by supposed slumlords who aren't doing repairs. And I remember a few weeks ago there was a story about a slumlord supposedly who they were going to lock up on Rikers Island because he refused to do repairs. Do you really think that this guy wanted to be locked up on Rikers Island? I'd be willing to bet that ain't got no money for repairs. Okay, it doesn't have the money because of this rent stabilization law. We're going to see more stories like that as time goes by. That's what people do in Brooklyn. They live there. Brooklyn Law School professor Edward Jenger said it has a lot of residential buildings, many of which carry mortgages that are subject to rising interest rates. The district's real estate cases also now comprise roughly half of all business bankruptcies filed in the district. Single asset real estate, Chapter 11 cases, petitions by companies whose sole business is owning and operating a single project or property, accounted for 41.9% of all Chapter 11 cases filed in New York's Eastern District last year, and 43.7% of cases filed during the first half of 2024, according to data compiled by the American Bankruptcy Institute. The average for the rest of the country is below 10%. Wow, that's amazing. So yeah, they have 4 times higher number of real estate bankruptcies in New York than the rest of the country. That's insane. Okay, but not surprising. Like I said, the laws they pass, unintended consequences of it. So what will the result be? Some of these properties are going to go back to the banks. Some of them will be picked up by other investors on the for a bargain. Properties, a lot of them will be falling into disrepair. Tenants will have a slumlord supposedly who won't do repairs, doesn't fix things up, and what's the solution? Throw that rent control law out. That's the solution. Okay, destroy the law, throw it in the trash. It doesn't benefit anyone. Will people's rents increase temporarily if they were to get rid of the law? I don't know, because remember, there still is a maximum amount that people are going to be able to pay. So landlords, this is something that they don't talk about a lot, but landlords can only charge what people are able to pay in terms of rent. So if you have a building there and you have, let's say, 10 units in it, and you have rent control on it, so you can't rent it out for more than $1,000 a month right now, and then they take away that rent control law, and you're like, well, I'm going to start charging people $2,000 a month. But in that local area, nobody is actually able to pay $2,000 a month. Well, you can't charge that. You might be able to charge $1,300 because that's what people are still willing and able to pay, but you'll never get $2,000. So, the market is self-correcting. That's what I'm trying to say. All landlords know this. They know that you can only charge what people are willing and able to pay, and there's no cartel out there forcing people, you have no other choice except to pay this exorbitant rent. No, there's nothing like that exists, and it never could exist because there's too much competition within this business. Anyway, put a comment, tell me what you think of this down in the comment section down below.